Welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. Today I will be joined by Randi-Lee Bowslaugh from her home in Welland, Ontario. Randi-Lee is an author, a cancer survivor, kickboxing champion, mental health advocate, a mom, and so much more. In this episode, we discuss being a mom of a transgender son, his autism diagnosis, and how Randi-Lee and her family dealt with it all. Then Randi will share her cancer story with us, and finally she gives us an open and honest account of her struggles with her mental health, and we get to hear from Randi-Lee what she did to help her overcome these struggles. You will get to know Randi-Lee in this episode, and like me, you will find that she is inspiring, and her sparkling and vibrant personality is so infectious. Having listened to her personal experiences, I know her story will resonate with you, and I know that there is something positive that you can take away from Randi's story. Enjoy the episode, and as always, keep listening. Hi, Randi-Lee. It's so nice to have you. I'm so glad I could get to catch up with you again. How have you been?
I've been pretty good. The weather has turned chilly again, but that's all right. How have you been?
Oh, yeah, no, I've been good, but I feel you completely with the chilly weather. Cape Town is headed for winter, and our sunny days are almost over.
No, our sunny days are just a-coming.
Nice. I love it. So it's just full days ahead.
Yes, I'm so excited.
So, Randi, thank you so much again for coming and sharing your story with us today. Why don't we jump in and you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So I live in Canada, and I have 2 teenagers and a grandbaby who is just 1.5.
Oh my goodness. Randi, I saw that, and I just want to say that you don't look a day over 25.
Well, I am over 25, but I like that. I will take it. And I also have 4 kitty cats and 2 dogs, which I've been TikToking. I love watching the animal videos, so I started posting my animals, and it's fun. I just posted another one today of 2 of my cats fighting over a box. Who was going to win?
It sounds so cute. I need to get on TikTok.
Oh, they've got their cutest videos. Love animals. I've been married for almost 9 years now. I have written a bunch of books. I have my own YouTube channel. I'm a competitive kickboxer. And I know we're going to dig into some other stuff. So where do you want to start with all that other stuff?
I'm more fascinated with you being a kickboxer right now. So tell me about that.
All right. So it's been, I don't know, probably about 10 years or so-ish. And it actually started because we put our youngest into jiu-jitsu. And at that time, during his jiu-jitsu class, there was an adult fitness kickboxing class going on. And it's actually really funny. I'd look over and I'd be like, those girls have really nice butts. I want a really nice butt. So I joined the class. Realized it was so much fun. And then I went from the fitness classes to the regular classes. And from there, I started competing. And actually in 2015, I was Canadian national champ in my division. In 2016, I went to Worlds. And then I also went to the Pan Americans in Mexico. And it's just been so
awesome.
fun.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And last year, before COVID shut everything down, I was a coach for the Ontario Winter Games, which is like Olympic style gaming we were there for a weekend, and I was one of the kickboxing coaches for that. But it's really cool because it has, I can't even remember, but a whole bunch of different sports. There was like synchronized swimming and soccer and all sorts of different ones. So the kids got to see what other sports kind of were around and stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, to be competing on the world stage, that's a seriously big deal. I mean,
it was fun.
I can only imagine. Wow. But you won in your division, right? And you brought home a medal
I did silver
with the
at the
Canadian team.
Yes, at the Pan Americans.
Yeah?
It was fun. Hangs on my wall. It's very pretty.
That's so cool. So, Randy, you're a mom of two, and your youngest son has been diagnosed with autism. When you found out, tell us what kind of adjustments you had to make.
There was a bit of an adjustment, but we had already been dealing with behaviors. My child didn't get diagnosed until he was 8 because my child's transgender, so born a girl and is now a boy. And autism in girls looks very different than autism in boys. So for the longest time, nobody was giving us an answer as to why these behaviors were going on. They would say ADHD, then it was ODD, and then it was everything under the sun that they just kept going through. And finally, when he was 8, the doctor said, you know what? It's autism. And I was like, that makes sense. That actually, instead of having 15 different diagnoses for all of these symptoms, it's one encompassing all of it, which made so much more sense. So the adjustment was really kind of happy to know that there was a reason. And then we were just able to give the proper support, because it wasn't anymore that you just didn't like authority, right? It wasn't anymore that you just wanted to yell and scream and temper tantrum. It was a sensory thing. It was a meltdown. It just made so much more sense, and it was a lot easier to handle knowing why. I'm not going to say it was easy to handle in general. Just in the back of my mind, I could go, okay, so he's not trying to push me into traffic because he wants me into traffic. He's trying to run into traffic, and I'm stopping him, and I'm just in the way.
And I mean, when this was happening, Randi-Lee, was this before the diagnosis?
That part, that was after. So before the diagnosis, it was a lot of meltdowns in school. So they had him in a regular class, and he's very, very smart. Like, we actually just got midterm marks and straight A's. But
that's fantastic.
Online is so good for him. But having 20 other kids in the class, that was very overwhelming. And, sit still in your desk, just listen. It was too much.
It's difficult for them.
Yeah, doing work at home, we do like however long one assignment will take, whether it's 15 minutes or, like an hour, we'll do that one assignment, and then we take a nice break. Whereas at school, it's like, okay, well, your break isn't for another hour and a half. Yes. So there would be a lot of meltdowns at school and throwing things and yelling. And at that time, he didn't really have, so he's very, very verbal, always has been, but he didn't have the understanding of what to say or how to express himself. So it would just be yelling. Yes. Now at 14 and a heck of a lot of therapy, he has a lot more words to explain what's going on and what he's thinking, what he's feeling.
That's right. And this is speech therapy that would help him with this.
Speech therapy was part of it, but it was also a lot of just like regular therapy, because for him, identifying emotions was very difficult. So when he was younger, the emotions were either angry or happy. There was no in between. There was no sad. There was no upset. There was no annoyed. It was, I was angry or I was happy. Yeah. And so through a lot of just like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, he was able to learn a lot more of identifying different emotions, which has really helped, especially anxious. So he's got huge anxiety, and being able to identify when that anxiety is being triggered has been a really big help.
Now you're saying that he transitioned or is still transitioning, right?
Yeah.
Did this make it any worse after his diagnosis?
No, actually, it's actually funny how I found out, how he told me, he was having a bath, and I always start the tub for him, right? And that kind of thing. And so he's yelling, Mom, 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 come here, come here. So I'm thinking, oh no, what's happening? Because he's yelling like he's being murdered in the tub. So I run from the other side of the house. I open the door, I go, what? And I notice he's like totally fine. Nothing's wrong, right? And he goes, I just wanted to tell you that I'm a boy. okay. It's like, you couldn't tell me this when you're out of the tub. We needed to yell like you were dying.
Yes.
I just needed to tell you. And this was 2 years ago. And I said, okay, that's fine. Can we finish talking about that when you get out of the tub? He goes, yeah, okay. All right. So it was just, and once he did that, a lot of the self-doubt and self-esteem issue, like he has a lot of self-esteem issues still, but a lot of that seemed to have dissipated, and he seems like he's a little bit more comfortable with himself.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that is a innate response, to say, Mom, I want to tell you I am a boy. Right?
Yeah.
So then what did you do
I just
to help him on this journey?
After he got out of the tub, because I was like, no, we'll talk about this when you're out and you're dressed. I was just like, okay, so what does this mean for me and for Dad? And he goes, well, I just want you to say he and him. I said, okay. And he's like, and my name is Levin and not Tisha. I'm like, okay. Anything else that I need to do? He goes, no. All right.
Okay.
Sure. So that was in the summer. So as he was starting into the school year, I sent a note to the teacher ahead of time, and he was starting in a new class too. So it was probably a little easier because he didn't have to tell people he already knew that he was going to be referred to as he, him, because none of these people knew him anyway. So it was a nice fresh start. And so I just emailed the teacher ahead of time and said, hey, this is the situation. And that was it.
Okay. And he's happy.
Most days. he deals with depression too. So, I mean, we got ups and we got downs. But for the most part, yeah, he's pretty content.
So, I mean, what do you say for parents whose children tell them we would like to transition, and also children who have been diagnosed with autism? Because both of those are sort of life-changing events. Yeah. So what do you say to those parents?
I'll start with the autism, because that's what happened to me first. So, like I said, it was kind of like a relief for us because we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was. And by being told it was all these other diagnoses, especially the ODD. So ODD is oppositional defiant disorder, where it's basically the kid just doesn't want to listen to authority. Well, when we're first told that it's that, we're thinking, okay, you're just saying no to us all the time because you just don't want to listen.
Yeah.
But then having that change of perspective, knowing that it's actually autism, and the first thought is always no because he hasn't had time to process the request, that's a big difference. And I've heard some people, they talk about you have to change all of your ideas of what your kid will be like when they're older and stuff. And why? That's kind of my thought. And I understand the spectrum is huge, but really when my child was born, I didn't look at them and go, you're going to be a doctor when you grow up, right? I went, you're going to be happy when you grow up. You're going to be healthy when you grow up. Like, I'm not picking your career. So your autism doesn't change my plans for you. My plans for you are still to grow up, move out my house at some point, although he keeps saying he's never, and be a functional member of society and be happy and healthy. And so that never changed for me. So I would just say, once you have that diagnosis, do a bunch of research and figure out what works for your kid, because there's so many different therapies out there, and it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out what works. And as they get older, it's going to change. ABA works for him when he was younger, but now that he's older, he looks at me and goes, I'm not doing that. Right? Same with speech therapy. He doesn't want to go into speech therapy anymore. And he is still a bit delayed in speech, but when he was in grade 1, it was a lot easier to get him to go to speech therapy because you just pick up your kid and say, this is where we're going. At 14, you can't do that. So just roll in with the changes in life. And then for any parents that their kid is coming to them and saying, hey, I'm actually a boy or I'm actually a girl, whatever the difference is, I would just say, ask them what it is they need from you and then provide that to them. Because my kid deciding that they're not a girl anymore and they're a boy doesn't change the fact that I carried them in my belly, doesn't change the fact that I gave birth, doesn't change the fact that I've raised them for the past, I guess, 12 years when he came out, and it doesn't change the fact that I love him. So just, what do you need from me? Okay, cool, I'm there for you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to lie, I definitely have grieved the fact that I don't have a little girl anymore, because when I was pregnant, I kept saying, I'm going to have a girl, I'm going to have a girl. Like, I wanted a baby girl, but I don't love him any less at all. So it's just kind of going, okay, well, I can't say my baby girl. I just have to come up with something else. My baby boy. Like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And so you have 2 boys now.
I have one teenage girl. So one is my stepdaughter. She's the one that has the baby. And then I gave birth to the 14-year-old. And then the baby is a boy, my grandson.
Okay. Nice big family. So, yeah, Randy, your life is so multifaceted, right? And all of the things that you experience. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm looking at you and you look so happy and content and yeah, and upbeat. I mean, you've gone through so many experiences and we'll unpack some of them, but I must tell you, I admire your spirit.
Thanks.
It's really awesome and it's infectious. Yes.
Oh, thank you. It definitely has taken a lot of work, but thanks.
So tell me about your cancer journey. I know that you are, like me, a cancer survivor. So high five.
Yeah, so that happened in 2018, and so almost 3 years. In the summer, it'll be 3 years. I'm going to take it back actually to 2017. In 2017 in November, I went for the physical that all women are supposed to do. And I'm going to say this right now. Do not put it off. If it's your turn to go get it done, go get it done.
I agree.
Yes. And so then in December, I got the results back and my doctor said, there's some, and he used a big, long medical term, squamous something cells. Anyways, bad stuff going on down there. And he said, you got to go to a gynecologist. I said, okay. January, now we're in 2018, January, I go to the gynecologist. He takes the little bit to send off to testing, sends off to testing, and it comes back and it's what they call precancerous cells. I go, okay, so it's precancer, like that's beforehand, no big deal. And he said, so we're going to do a surgery and we're going to take out that portion of your cervix. Yes. And I said, okay, great. So in March, I go in for what I call first surgery because there's more. And I go in and that one's just at the local hospital here. And they had a hard time finding my veins because my hands were so cold, but eventually they did. And the surgery went fine. And I went for my checkup appointment 2 weeks later with the gynecologist. And what they do is after they take that little bit out, they send it for more testing just to be sure. And so after they sent it away, I was supposed to go 8 weeks before I went back. And I was supposed to heal up before I went back for that post-op appointment. 1 week later, my phone rings. And I'm like, hello? And it's the doctor. I go, uh-oh. Like, why the heck are they calling me? And the nurse says, I need you to come in today. Okay. When? And she goes, as soon as you can, please come in. I said, oh, okay. So I got my in-laws to watch my son. And I went in. And of course, I'm thinking, why am I here right now? Like my mind is going a million miles a minute. I know that it's going to be bad news because why else would they call me, tell me I need to come in right now? It's only been a week. Like clearly something was wrong. And finally, after I was there probably a good 2 or 3 hours because they were just trying to fit me in. So I go in, I'm sitting in the room and the doctor comes in. The first thing he says to me, he goes, you already have kids, right? It's like, yeah. He goes, and you're not planning to have any more. I said, no. Me and my husband actually 2 years prior to that had already agreed not to have any more, and he had already had a vasectomy. Yeah. And he goes, okay, because you have cervical cancer and you need a full hysterectomy. I just sat there in shock. Like I knew deep down that's what he was going to say just because of the circumstances that brought me into his office. But yes, actually hearing it is a whole other issue. So I'm sitting there in complete shock and go, okay, you can take it out. And I just kept like pointing to my stomach and like pointing to him. You can take it out. You can take it out. I don't need it anymore. And he goes, okay, well, you just had surgery. You have to heal before we can do another surgery. It's like, okay, that's fine. You can have it. I don't need it. And so I go into my car, I sit down, and I call my husband right away. And I'm still in shock, and I tell him. And he kind of talks me down from my mind racing and says, okay, well, we'll do whatever we have to do. And then in July of that year, I went in for second surgery. And
sure. This is the big one.
This is the big one. And I was petrified. I was so freaking scared. And there had been appointments leading up to it, all the checkup appointments to check on it, make sure nothing was spreading or anything. And I'm sitting there. My husband's waiting with me in the like waiting area where they're getting you ready, putting all the IVs and stuff in. The one nice thing about that area, so this was in a hospital that was like an hour away because it's the cancer hospital. And one nice thing is they have these heated blankets to use before you go in. So I'm sitting there all cozy warm. So,
nice.
Something good. And so they're poking me and prodding me and all that jazz. I go in for the surgery. It went fine. They tell me it went good. But I can remember waking up from that, and the pain was the worst pain I have ever experienced. And like, I'm just waking up to it, and I start like hyperventilating because I wasn't expecting it to hurt so bad and everything. So the nurses had to rush over. Yeah, the nurses rushed over. They're trying to calm me down because the more that you hyperventilate, the worse it gets.
I'm more concerned about the fact that you woke up with all this pain.
Yeah. Well, it was after the surgery. So, I mean, so how it works for hysterectomy, for those who don't know, there's two different ways. But the way I had it was that they basically blow up your stomach, your abdomen. They blow it up with whatever gas, and they pull out all the parts. And so that gas really is quite sore because so my stomach was still distended for quite a few days afterwards before all the gas was out. And that gas actually, it pushes up too and makes your shoulders and everything hurt because your body is not used to that. So yeah, I woke up in all this pain. The nurse comes over and they gave me whatever the heck it was, some kind of good stuff. Drugs. Yeah, some kind of good stuff. They gave me some drugs and a banana popsicle, which was great. And so eventually I calmed down, and they finally took me from that room to another room to finish healing up before they sent me home. And then, yeah, I went home that same night, even though I was so out of it. I was surprised they sent me home, but they did. And a few days later, I was so sick that my husband had to take me back to the hospital. So we went back to the one that was close to home, and I had gotten an infection. After the first surgery, they gave me antibiotics to take just to make sure I didn't get an infection. But after this surgery, they didn't, which I don't know why, but whatever. So I ended up getting an infection, and so it was spreading throughout my whole body. And I was so weak, so dehydrated. I could barely stand, barely talk. It was awful.
Yeah, so infections, I mean, they make you extremely sick.
Yeah, especially after such a big surgery.
Exactly.
And so again, hooked up to all these IVs. They're doing tests to make sure that it was nothing about the surgery that did it specifically. So I'm getting ultrasound. I got a CAT scan. And I was just so out of it. I've never seen my husband so scared because I almost died. If he wouldn't have taken me to the hospital, then that infection would have taken me out. Stayed there overnight until they had enough fluids in me, and I was kind of coming back around because I had like the fluids, IV drip, and then like a antibiotic drip or whatever. And so they sent me home the next day with a bunch of more antibiotics to take. And eventually.
No, we needed to kill that bug.
Yeah, exactly. And we killed it good.
Yes, good.
And then when I did go for the follow-up appointment, and again, I was so scared because this was the appointment to tell me if the surgery got everything or if I needed to do more stuff. And I was so scared, and it's stupid, but I was scared about losing all my hair because when you go through chemo and stuff, you lose all your hair. And it's a stupid thing to be scared of because there's far worse things. The reason I was so scared was because if I lost my hair, and up to that point, I hadn't really told anybody that I had cancer. So my husband, my mom, my aunt, and my mother-in-law, they're the ones that knew. That's it. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell anybody. And so as a kickboxer, I just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. People had no idea where I went because I was so scared. And so the idea of losing my hair meant people would be able to see that I had cancer, and then I couldn't hide it anymore. And I had been hiding it now for months. Luckily, though, they said that after they did whatever test they do to the organs when they take them out, they said it was all good. We got all of it. So I didn't need to do all that other stuff. Okay. From there, that's when I started telling people because I was okay then. And I don't know why, but it was just so traumatic that I couldn't tell people before. But once I got the, okay, you're fine, then I was in a place that I could accept it and I could tell people.
It's a hard thing to process,
Yeah.
a dreaded disease, because, I mean, it kills so many people on an annual basis. And I think we all, as survivors, once we get to that survival point, that's the ultimate relief.
Yeah. And then there's always still that whenever you get really sick or you have a pain or something, my mind always races back to, did the cancer come back? Right? Because like my grandma, she had thyroid cancer. They took out her thyroid. They told her she should do radiation, but she didn't because she was stubborn. And she actually had a tumor grow back. And that's what ended up taking her out. So there's always in the back of my head whenever I have like weird pain. So I recently realized that I can't have cow's milk anymore. And that came from severe abdominal cramps. And this was after I had the cancer. This was only a year ago. Prior to realizing that it was the cow's milk, I was sent for a test to check on my ovaries because they left ovaries. They took all the other stuff. And I went for a test to just make sure it was nothing to do with cancer because it was in that same area. So it was just reliving that kind of scared state again, going, oh my goodness, is it back? And it wasn't. It was just stay away from milk.
Yeah. But I mean, it's so real. And it brings up all the anxiety that you had the first time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you deal with that?
My husband's really good about putting things in perspective for me. We've been together 14 years, so we know each other very well, our entire adult lives. And so whenever I'm kind of freaking out or whatever, he'll say, usually it's something stupid. Or funny, but he just kind of snaps me out of my craziness. And then, of course, writing is my biggest outlet. So, I mean, I've written 5 books, and of those, 3 of them are nonfictions. That is how I get it out. I don't talk a huge amount about my cancer in my newest book, but I do mention it and I do talk about it a little bit. And that was helping me come to terms with it. And I'm probably down the road, I'll write a small little manifesto about the cancer itself and the anxiety that you get after you have it, because it's always there with you, that constant worry that it's coming back. Because I'm getting to that point, but writing things out is what really helps me to deal with it. And then I also go, okay, if I'm writing it and I publish all my stuff, right? So it helps me to know that hopefully I'm helping somebody else with it too.
Yeah. I know that for me, my cancer was such a spiritual experience. It made me really sort of take a hard look at my life, and I made some changes. Is that something that you experienced?
I wouldn't say during that time, only because there was so much going on. So at that time, Levin, my kid with autism that we were talking about, he was going through some serious stuff. He was trying to hurt himself. He was trying to commit suicide. And so
I was about 11, 12?
Yeah, 10, 11 at the time. Yeah.
Sure.
And so I didn't have the time to focus on me and what cancer was doing to me that much, because I was in survival mom mode. I had to make sure that everything was put away, that he didn't have access to whatever. Like, we have a safe in the kitchen that has knives and pills, like medicines, all locked up. But you're constantly on this high alert, because even though I can take away that stuff, he can try to strangle himself with a belt. He can try to break a mirror and cut himself. So it was not easy. And he was going through a lot of meltdowns too. There was just a lot of sensory overload stuff, and just hormone changes, I think, was a huge thing, because at that time, this is where being born a girl is not the greatest, because he was going through all those changes. And so his body doing that, he just didn't know how to handle it. Because, I mean, most women, we know cramps hurt a lot. And
Yeah. But for them, it's different. Their
it
pain
is.
thresholds, I don't believe it's too high, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
children with
So,
autism.
yeah.
Or is it or is it the other way around? I forget.
It's usually pretty high, but I have a pretty high pain threshold too. But I can remember being that age and getting my time of the month, and the cramps were intense. And so I don't think he could understand what was happening to his body with all those changes and everything. So we had a lot of meltdowns too, not just where he was trying to hurt himself, but just didn't know how to express himself or what was happening within his body. So we would have meltdowns. I remember the one night he grabbed a watermelon, threw it on the ground, and threw vinegar on the ground. It smelled like salad dressing in the house. But it was,
I shouldn't be laughing. This is serious though.
It's serious, but you know what? I have to laugh at it. Like, I'm laughing too. In the moment that it was happening, I wasn't laughing. But if I don't look back and laugh at it now, it makes me upset. It makes me want to cry, right? So that is probably one of the biggest coping mechanisms, is that I'm not letting what happened in the past affect where I am right now. So when those things happened, they were scary. They were awful. We ended up having to call the police to come and help us and take him to the hospital because we just couldn't calm him down. And it was scary. But now I look back at it and go, we have come so far. Like, that's not even close to where we were. But so at the time, I didn't have time to focus on my own mortality. But when I did stop to think about it, my questions weren't around myself, but if cancer does end up being the death of me, what's going to happen to him? And like, I know my husband would still have him, but it takes a lot. And the relationship between him and dad is different than the relationship between him and mom, right? Like, I'm the one that's been homeschooling him for a while. I've been the one that goes to all the doctor's appointments. And not to say that my husband wouldn't, but he's got to go to work. Somebody's got to pay for the house we live in. Yeah. And so that's where my mind was at the time, is what happens to him if I wasn't here. The nice thing is, though, later that year, so all my cancer stuff was like July, like I said, in August, I got the news that I did not have to do any extra work. And that September, we were able to actually get him into a treatment facility. So he went there and he lived there Sunday to Friday and would come home for the weekends. So during that time when I could breathe and I wasn't on high alert anymore, that's when I was able to finally step back and go, holy, I had cancer. Exactly. Holy beep. I had cancer. Like, what the beep? And so that's when I was able to kind of stop and go, okay, what is it that I want to do with the rest of my life now? Because now I have time to think about it. And actually, just before all of that happened, my doctor had wrote me off of work. So I used to be an employment counselor, but the stress of everything was a lot. So he wrote me off of work on a medical leave. It was earlier that year, but I was like, hey, I'm not going back to that. And I had opened up a fitness studio, and I got cancer all at the same time. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we make plans and God laughs.
Exactly. Yes. And finally in August, I'm still trying to get the fitness business to work and all that stuff. It didn't, which is fine. But I still have clients that I train with. I still coach kickboxing at the gym that I train at. I teach classes online. So it's not to say that all of that was for nothing. I just had to do it in a different way.
Also, I think that with COVID, everybody just had to learn to pivot.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just had the trial run.
Exactly. Yes, I like the way that you put that. And I've been able now to focus more on the things that make me happy, which is writing my books, doing my podcast, and talking about mental health.
So you've written 5 books, right? 3 of them nonfiction. It's A Mother's Truth, Embracing Me, and then the latest one that you've written.
The latest one was Embracing Me. The first one I wrote was called Thoughts of a Wanderer. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other 2 books, I believe, are children's books.
Yes. Yep. So one's a Christmas story that I put out last year, just before Christmas, and the other one I put out last month, and it's called Diamond the Cat, and it's based on my kitty cat that I had when I was little.
I saw that and I thought it was so cute.
Yes, of the real Diamond. Because, a diamond is a girl's best friend.
Absolutely.
I used to say that all the time about her. She was the best cat ever. She passed away 2 years ago this August, but she was the best kitty ever. So I had to immortalize her in the book.
Stunning. I love it. Now tell me about your podcast, because that's something we have in common, huh? We are.
Yes. So my podcast is called The Write or Die Show, like you're writing something. And it's because I'm an author and I have mental health, so I have depression. I want to do a podcast. What I'm going to do, and from talking to different people, I came to realize I'm going to interview other authors and we're going to talk about mental health. So the show is all about talking to other authors, whether they're published traditionally or self-published, like I'm self-published. And we dig down deep into mental health from a personal perspective. So I shouldn't say nobody on there is a doctor. I think this week I'm interviewing a doctor, but the idea is that they're talking from their own personal experience, kind of like what we're doing right now, and sharing their coping mechanisms that they have found to work for them.
Yeah.
Trying to end the stigma.
Yes. And I find, there's stigma with so many mental health issues. You mentioning depression. But you would find people who would just hide it. They would not admit that they are depressed or that they suffer from depression.
Yeah. And that's all what my Embracing Me book is all about, was embracing the fact that I have depression. Depression doesn't have me. So saying that
your depression started at a very young age.
Yeah.
With your stepfather.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the earliest that I can really recall it, I was probably about 14. I mean, I may have experienced it before that, but I don't remember, right? So my stepfather was an alcoholic, and you never knew what you were going to get when you went home after school. So, I mean, he was a truck driver too, so it's not that he didn't work, but as soon as he would get home from work, he'd be drinking constantly, all the time. There was a case of beer in the house. So you didn't know if you were going to get the nice guy, because he really was a nice guy when he wasn't drinking. And I think a lot of alcoholics are the same. But as soon as he was drinking, all of a sudden he was making issues where there weren't any. He would make comments about, like, my mom still being in love with my dad. I don't have any memories of my mom and dad being together. They hadn't been together in over 20 years, and he's just making, or I guess at that time, 15 years, or 14 years. But, like, I don't understand where it even came from. And so he would just make stuff up, and sometimes he would be throwing things and yelling, very verbally, emotionally abusive. Luckily, he never physically abused me. I have no idea about my mom, because she would usher me up the stairs if she knew that he was getting into a mood, and she would go to your room.
Right,
so
because
that
everybody in the house is constantly on eggshells.
Exactly. So I'd go upstairs and get my kitty cats, Diamond being one of them. I had 2 cats at the time, Diamond and Tigger. And I would just go in my room and I'd cry. I'd cry and I'd cry and I'd cry because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what kind of help was out there. I felt like I was being ignored as a teenager. Like, I was going through all of these things, as most teenagers do, with puberty and hormones in school. And then I was being picked on for being poor. Like, I was not a popular kid. I hated school. I felt so out of place there. And then I didn't have my mom to talk to. And growing up, I was a mama's girl, like hardcore mama's girl. We did everything together because my mom was a single mom until she met him and got married. So for most of my life, it was me, my mom, and my brother. My brother's 4 years older than me. And then it became this other person who wasn't a nice person, and it just threw everything off, and it felt like my mom didn't want me anymore.
That's tough when you're a kid.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time at my aunt's house. because it was safe. I spent a lot of time going to the youth group at church because there I actually had friends. I only had like 2 or 3 friends at school because I honestly don't know, to be completely honest. You know how high schools are. I mean, you have groups of people and I just didn't fit into any of them. I was just on the outside of all of them. So that was really hard. So I skipped a lot in school. I skipped a heck of a lot. Got horrible grades, always passed everything, but got horrible grades, which is really funny because in college I got over 90s in everything. And that just shows how when you're in a bad state, like when you're in depression or whatever your mental health is dealing with, it's hard to just do day-to-day stuff. So yeah, I passed, but I passed with like a 60, whereas I was totally capable of getting a 90. I just didn't care. As long as I was passing, my mom didn't say anything about my skipping. So I passed. Eventually, it got to the point actually that at 17 years old, I moved out and I moved into my friend's house with her family because I couldn't handle it anymore. At that time, I had thought about running away. I had thought about trying to kill myself. I was a mess. I was a wreck. I was just simply going through the motions of life. And my biggest coping mechanism at that time was writing. And so that's where actually my first book, Thoughts of a Wanderer, comes from. It's all that poetry that I wrote when I was 14, 15, 16, all throughout high school, writing about, and this might trigger people, but writing about killing myself, writing about slitting my wrist, writing about falling into a hole and dying. That was my way of dealing with it so that I didn't go through with the action of it. Yeah. So I moved in with my friends because I just couldn't take it anymore. But that didn't solve the problem. That took me out of the bad situation with my alcoholic stepfather, but I didn't fit in there either. I wasn't actually part of their family. So I still felt left out. Eventually, I moved back home because my mom and him had split up. But when you move back home after something like that, it still didn't feel right because my mom was going through all of her own crap with having, separated from him and things that, again, I didn't fit in. There was no place for me. And then I moved out, got pregnant, and I lived in my own place for a while, lived with my aunt for a while. I just kind of was hopping around because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And I was just waking up every day and just trying to get through that one day, that 1 minute, that 1 hour of each day. And then after I had my baby, I moved back in with my mom and things were better, except she had found another not so good guy who ended up being on drugs and super abusive. Now, I wasn't around that much to hear his abuse because at that time I was like just going out with, like, I was going out with my friends, but like we weren't going out partying. We were going out and like going to playgrounds and stuff because I had a baby, right? So doing baby stuff. And then I met my husband when he was like 6 months old or something. And so I was always over with him, hanging out with him. Then I'd just go home after like hanging out with him. And so I wasn't really around to hear a lot of that abuse. But once I did start hearing it, I was like, oh, beep, I got to get out of here. So then I did move out from there. I was lucky I was able to get into our housing program here where I live so that I could afford rent, because that's the biggest issue, right? Is I couldn't afford to rent a 2-bedroom place by myself as a single young mom. But luckily I was able to do that. So we got a nice, cute little apartment. I started college and the rest is history.
Yeah. At any point, did you seek counseling or any kind of help for your mental health state?
Not at that time, which was a big mistake. And that's why I like to speak out about it, because when you're going through all that and you don't know what to do, finding a therapist or a counselor is step number 1, or should be step number 1. But I didn't know, and people weren't talking about mental health. I had no idea how to go about doing that. So it wasn't until I was late 20s that I finally realized, hey, I can I can find a counselor. I can go to therapy. I don't have to hide it. This is not taboo. This going to therapy isn't going to kill me. It's going to actually help me. So it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I finally did. And yeah, I went through my work's EAP program and had a counselor for a few sessions. And then I used our benefits. My husband's work has some different benefits. And I actually I saw a psychologist for a while and did some CBT and DBT therapy.
That's awesome.
That was probably the biggest help.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you and I touched on the spiritual aspect of this, and I wanted to know if you had any spiritual coping mechanism at the time.
That is actually a really great question. So I touch on it just a little itty bitty bit in my book, but really the biggest thing, so when I was going through it as a teenager, I did mention this, I went to youth group a lot. So youth group was at my church, and that is where I felt the safest. And so I always wanted to go there. My aunt is actually the one that would bring me to youth group. My aunt's the one that really introduced me to church and God, so I'm a Christian. Being with her was really good. And every night we'd read the Bible before bed because I'd sleep over there constantly. And from knowing that and knowing that God wouldn't want me to kill myself, so I didn't. That's literally how basic it came down to, is I wanted to kill myself, but I knew that I wasn't allowed to kill myself. So it sounds kind of stupid because, well, you're allowed to, you can do it, but in the very basic necessity of it is God says, no, don't do it. So I just didn't do it.
Yeah. In closing, do you have any last words of inspiration for people that's listening?
Yeah, I always have lots of words. So just like my cute little sign says, you are stronger than you think. When we are going through some of the hardest times in our life and we don't know what we're going to do next, just remember that you're stronger than you think you are. Just remember that right now in this moment might be awful, but in the next moment, it might be great. And I'm not saying the next day or the next week, literally the next moment, things can change. Don't let one moment, one part ruin the whole day. And I'm going to steal a little bit from Frozen 2. So my grandson, he loves the movie Frozen 2. And if you haven't watched it, even as an adult, you should, because there's a lot about mental health in there. And do the next right thing is my favorite parts in that movie. And so that is what I think people should always look at. What is the one next right thing that I can do in this moment to move forward?
That's great advice. Thank you. And tell me, if anybody would like to get a hold of your book, your latest book, Embracing Me, where do they do that? Where do we find your podcast? And are you on social media?
Yes. All right. So all of my books are on Amazon. So the easiest way that I do it is I just put in my name, Randi-Lee Bowslaugh, and then all of the books will pop up. Just because Embracing Me is such like a broad title, there's a lot of different titles that'll come up. So I find the easiest is to search my name. My podcast is also a YouTube channel. So if you want it, it's the Write or Die Show. So make sure that you add show onto the end of that, because there are other podcasts that are called Write or Die. So Write or Die Show. And yeah, it's on YouTube. And then it's on basically any podcasting platform that you use. So you'll be able to find it. I'm definitely on social media. So I am on Facebook, and you can find me at RB Writing or the Write or Die Show. So I've got those too. And I am on Instagram at Randy B Writing. And of course, TikTok, if you want to see my animals. I am at Fred, Daff, and the Gang. So my dog's name is Freddie and Daphne. So it's Fred, Daff, and the Gang, to include all the kitty cats.
That is the cutest thing.
Yeah, I had to add that in there because I mean they're the cutest. I'm not on Twitter. I don't tweet.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, I'm getting TikTok to come and see these videos.
You need to.
They sound so cute. Yes, but I do. I go onto all your platforms. Go to your YouTube. So I need to get onto your TikTok.
Yes, do it, because they are just the cutest things. 2 dogs, 4 cats. They get into crazy shenanigans. Especially my one cat only has 3 legs, and so he's adorable to watch. He
What's
won the
his name?
box war this morning.
Oh, wow. What is his name?
Neo.
Neo, the
Yeah.
3-legged cat.
Yes.
I'll also expect a book soon. Neo, the
I know.
3-legged cat.
I know it'll be a kid's book, I'm sure, but it's coming. It's coming. Right now, I am actually trying to work on some little scary stories because I love scary stuff. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, I like to do a little bit of everything.
Yes.
Keeps life interesting.
This is absolutely true. Randi-Lee, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us. And thank you so much for being transparent. And, I always say that the listeners will take what it is that they need from each story. Your story has a lot to offer. So thank you very much for sharing.
Yes, thanks for having me. I look forward to talking to you again. Bye.
That wraps up this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a minute to give me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast directory so you don't miss an episode. Please consider following My Centered Life on Facebook and Instagram for daily inspiration. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You can catch me again in the next episode. Same time, same place. Sending you lots of love and light. Bye.